I think the toughest thing for a director to do is to know what he wants. It's not how to get what you want, it's knowing what you want.
Steven Spielberg doesn't make a scene when he's done with someone. He doesn't shout or give angry interviews. He simply removes people from his world, and once you're out, there's no coming back. In his 50 years of making movies, Spielberg has created some of the most memorable films in cinema history. But behind his calm and professional demeanor, he keeps a mental list of people he will never work with again. This list isn't written down anywhere, but it's very real and very dangerous for any actor's career. When you cross Spielberg, you don't just lose a movie role, you lose access to his entire circle of influence in Hollywood. There are no second chances, no opportunities to make things right. He doesn't argue or fight back. He simply replaces you and moves on. Spielberg values trust and professionalism above everything else. Once that trust is broken, he gives you silence instead of direction. Sometimes it's a quiet comment to others in the industry. Sometimes it's a phone call that never comes. But when it's over, it's truly over, and Hollywood remembers. Over the years, 5 actors have found themselves permanently shut out of Spielberg's world. Each one crossed an invisible line, and none of them ever made it back into his good graces. Megan Fox, the explosive fallout. Megan Fox was barely 25 when she became one of the biggest stars in the world. The Transformers movies made her famous, and Spielberg, through his company DreamWorks, was one of the key people behind her success. What started as a career-making opportunity quickly turned into a disaster that would haunt her for years. Everyone knows about Fox's problems with Transformers director Michael Bay, but fewer people talk about how Spielberg got involved. During interviews, Fox made comments comparing Bay to Hitler, saying he wanted to be like the dictator on his movie sets. She was talking about Bay, but Spielberg, who was the executive producer on the Transformers movies, didn't take that comparison lightly at all. Multiple sources, including Bay himself, have said that Spielberg was the one who insisted Fox be fired before the 3rd Transformers movie. There was no angry public statement from Spielberg, no dramatic confrontation. He just quietly but firmly had her removed from the project. This is typical of how Spielberg handles problems. He doesn't create drama or make scenes, he simply makes decisions and sticks to them. Fox later tried to clarify her words, saying they were taken the wrong way, but the damage was already done. Spielberg, who rarely lets conflicts become public, never mentioned her name again, and has never worked with her since. During an interview years later, Fox admitted, "I was young, and I was careless with my words." She wasn't completely blacklisted from Hollywood, but the doors that Spielberg controlled were quietly closed to her forever. This matters because when Spielberg distances himself from someone, other powerful people in Hollywood often follow his lead. There's a clear pattern in how Spielberg operates. He doesn't attack people publicly, he simply detaches himself from them. His silence becomes absolute, and that silence speaks louder than any angry words ever could. Fox tried to continue her career with movies like Jennifer's Body and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films, but she never again found herself at the center of a major Spielberg-sized production. This wasn't coincidence, it was consequence. At the height of her fame, she was positioned to be the star of multiple big franchises for years to come. Then, in less than 12 months, that entire future disappeared. Years after their fallout, Fox said something that shows how much the situation affected her. "I was never Hollywood's favorite. Maybe that's too rude, but for a brief moment, she had Spielberg's support, and that moment could have changed everything." The problem wasn't just what she said, but where and when she said it. In Spielberg's world, there's an unspoken rule. If you disrespect the crew, you get replaced. If you disrespect the director, you get remembered, just not in a good way. Julia Roberts, The Icy Set. Sometimes tension between Spielberg and an actor isn't loud or dramatic. It just lingers in uncomfortable silences and in what's never said again. When Spielberg cast Julia Roberts as Tinkerbell in his movie Hook, it seemed like perfect casting. America's sweetheart working with the world's most famous director should have been magical, but the reality was very different. Behind the scenes, Roberts was dealing with intense media attention. Her engagement had fallen apart. Tabloids were following her everywhere, and she was under the kind of public scrutiny that can break a person down. On the movie set, things quickly became very uncomfortable. Spielberg reportedly started calling her Tinkerhell instead of Tinkerbell, and crew members confirmed that the nickname spread quickly throughout the production. In later interviews, Spielberg didn't hide his feelings about working with Roberts. "It wasn't a lot of fun," he said plainly. He never directly called her difficult, but he didn't need to. His distance from her said everything that needed to be said. During filming, Roberts apparently isolated herself from the rest of the cast. Some reports claimed she clashed with crew members, showed up late to set, or simply wasn't emotionally present for her scenes. Spielberg, who thrives on precision and calm working environments, quietly pulled back from her. After Hook was finished, Roberts went on to dominate movies in the 1990s with films like Pretty Woman, My Best Friend's Wedding, and Erin Brockovich, but Spielberg never worked with her again, not even once. At the 2002 Golden Globe Awards, Roberts presented Spielberg with the Best Director Award for Saving Private Ryan. Their moment on stage together was polite and professional, but it was also stiff and cold. There was no warmth between them, no sign of friendship or respect. When asked years later if he would ever cast Roberts again, Spielberg didn't avoid the question. He said, "No, it wasn't a good experience for me. That was it. No grudge, no personal attack, just a clear line drawn in the sand that he never crossed back over." Roberts has said very little about Hook in all the years since. She once mentioned the Tinkerhell nickname and brushed it off as exaggerated, but her silence about the experience speaks louder than any denial. She's worked with many of the best directors in Hollywood, including Steven Spielberg, Mike Nichols, and George Clooney, but never Spielberg again. In a rare interview about his casting process, Spielberg explained his philosophy. It's not just about performance, it's about energy. And that's where his relationship with Roberts fell apart. Spielberg doesn't just direct individual scenes, he carefully manages the entire atmosphere of his movie sets. When an actor disrupts that balance, even without meaning to, the cost is trust. For Roberts, Hook was just one movie in a successful career. For Spielberg, it was a decision that would last forever. Their careers both continued to soar, but the silence between them has never been broken. Shia LaBeouf, the broken trust. Some actors are like lightning bolts of energy and talent. Spielberg prefers to build steady lighthouses. For a while, it looked like these two very different approaches could work together successfully. Shia LaBeouf was personally chosen by Spielberg, who really believed in his potential. From the thriller Disturbia to the Transformers movies, and then Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, LaBeouf became like an unofficial student of the master director. But then came the interviews, the headlines, and one comment that destroyed everything between them. Shortly after Indiana Jones 4 was released in theaters, LaBeouf said this to reporters, "I feel like I dropped the ball on the legacy that people loved and cherished. You can blame the writer. You can blame Steven." That single sentence changed everything between him and Spielberg forever. Spielberg is known for keeping problems and disagreements private, within the family of people making the movie. He took LaBeouf's public criticism very personally. In Spielberg's world, loyalty is one of the most important values. Creative disagreements happen all the time, but publicly throwing your own director under the bus is something completely different and unforgivable. Years later, LaBeouf admitted that his comments were a huge mistake. He said, "I broke the code. That's not how you talk about your heroes." But the damage had already been done and couldn't be undone. Behind the scenes, it became clear that LaBeouf would never be invited back to the Indiana Jones franchise. Despite rumors and fan speculation, he was never asked to return for the 5th movie in the series. Spielberg didn't make any public statements about LaBeouf. He didn't call him out by name or criticize him in interviews. He just quietly moved on to other actors and other projects. What makes this situation even more striking is how much Spielberg had initially supported LaBeouf. He cast the young actor at a time when very few people his age were getting access to such major franchises and big-budget productions. But with that kind of access comes certain expectations about how you behave and what you say publicly. When that trust breaks, even just once, it's almost never rebuilt. Spielberg once said, There's a difference between chaos and instinct. And that's where LaBeouf became a problem. His talent was never questioned, but his unpredictability made working with him feel uncertain and risky. For a director like Spielberg, who succeeds through collaboration, control, and clear communication, uncertainty is the one thing he won't work around. LaBeouf's career didn't disappear completely. He moved into smaller, more personal independent films like Honey Boy and The Peanut Butter Falcon, projects that showed his impressive range as an actor. But the Spielberg chapter of his career was closed permanently. It wasn't loud or cruel, just final. Spielberg had given LaBeouf something most actors only dream of: a major franchise, a spotlight on the world stage, and a chance to step into a beloved movie legacy. When LaBeouf stepped out of line publicly and without thinking, he lost all three of those things at once. That's not just a missed opportunity, it's a lesson in what not to say when important people are still paying attention to your words. Tom Sizemore, The Dangerous Gamble. Tom Sizemore had everything Spielberg needed for Saving Private Ryan, until his personal problems nearly destroyed everything. In that war epic, Sizemore delivered one of the most powerful performances of his entire career. He played Sergeant Horvath, the steady and reliable soldier fighting alongside Tom Hanks's character. His performance was gritty, loyal, and controlled, and Spielberg truly believed in his abilities. But away from the cameras, there was another story happening that Spielberg couldn't ignore forever. At the time of casting, Sizemore was already fighting a serious battle with drug addiction. Spielberg knew about these problems, but he still decided to give the actor a chance, with one absolutely non-negotiable condition. Spielberg reportedly told him, "If you fail a single drug test during production, you're fired immediately and we'll reshoot every scene you're in." This wasn't just a warning, it was written into his contract. For the entire length of the filming, Sizemore stayed clean and sober. He delivered an amazing performance that became one of the highlights of the movie. But the tension behind the scenes was constant and exhausting. Everyone knew it was a gamble, and Spielberg was fully aware of the risks he was taking. Years later, Sizemore confirmed the story in interviews. "Steven didn't trust me," he said. "He watched every move I made. He said it wasn't personal. It was protective." Spielberg was protecting what he knew would be a masterpiece film. And even though Sizemore succeeded during the filming, the director never cast him again in any future project. What makes this story particularly tragic is how talented Sizemore really was. Not just in Saving Private Ryan, but in everything leading up to it, including Heat, Natural Born Killers, and True Romance. He had the range, the screen presence, and the edge that made him perfect for certain types of roles. But Spielberg doesn't just cast actors based on their skill level. He also considers their reliability and whether they can bring clarity and focus to a set. Sizemore's life after Saving Private Ryan fell apart quickly. He had legal troubles, went to rehab multiple times, and had public meltdowns that created exactly the kind of chaos Spielberg never allows near his movie sets. One former crew member said, "You could see that Spielberg respected Sizemore's talent, but he wouldn't risk dealing with that kind of dangerous situation twice." Sizemore later admitted that he had hoped to work with Spielberg again, but deep down he understood that opportunity had closed forever. It wasn't because of one single moment, but because of the dark shadow of addiction and unpredictability that followed him everywhere. Spielberg didn't blacklist Sizemore or speak out against him publicly, but he also never called him back for other projects. TEs. For a filmmaker who values trust over raw talent, that silence communicated everything. Sizemore continued acting and kept pushing through his personal struggles, but the weight of what he had lost, the trust of Steven Spielberg, hung over his career for the rest of his life. Chevy Chase, The Meeting That Never Happened. Not all of Spielberg's professional relationships end on movie sets. Some never even get past the first meeting. Chevy Chase was already a household name long before Spielberg reached the peak of his career. From Saturday Night Live to National Lampoon's vacation movies, Chase had serious star power and an ego to match his fame. But while many actors fought hard for Spielberg's attention and approval, Chase never made it past the starting line. There's no public argument or viral disagreement between them, just a well-documented truth. Spielberg never worked with him and never even came close to hiring him for any project. Industry insiders point to an early meeting that happened in the 1980s. Chase was apparently considered for multiple Spielberg projects. Some sources say he was looked at for Raiders of the Lost Ark, while others point to lesser-known scripts that were in development at the time. But every version of the story ends the same way. Spielberg passed on him completely. One former casting executive explained that there was initial interest, but Spielberg didn't like the energy Chase brought to their meetings. Chase had a tendency to dominate every room he entered, and it wasn't about his talent level, it was about his attitude and approach. Spielberg is famous for creating harmony on his movie sets, with steady leadership and clear focus. Chase, on the other hand, had built a reputation for exactly the opposite kind of behavior. Multiple directors throughout Hollywood have spoken about how difficult Chase could be to work with. He was one for creative clashes, control issues, and creating tension on sets. While Spielberg never spoke publicly about Chase specifically, his complete absence from any Spielberg project says everything that needs to be said. Chase once joked in an interview, "There are people in this town who don't want to work with me. That's fine. I don't need everybody." That comment wasn't aimed directly at Spielberg, but it didn't need to be. Everyone in Hollywood understood who was missing from his resume, and why. Even during his prime years, Chase was rarely cast in prestigious director-driven productions. He gravitated toward comedies that were built around his specific comedic voice, not projects where he would need to serve someone else's creative vision. And Spielberg is a director who doesn't build films around stars. He builds them around stories that serve a larger purpose. One industry veteran explained it perfectly. Spielberg works with actors who serve the film, not actors who expect the film to serve them. There's no deleted scene involving Chase, no lost project that almost happened, no big headline-making disagreement. Just a clear and lasting distance between two very different approaches to making movies. Chase's career continued successfully with television, comedy tours, and occasional movie revivals. But Spielberg's silence toward him remained completely unbroken throughout the decades. And in that silence, you can hear something louder than any disagreement or argument: complete disinterest. Because in Spielberg's world, not every clash ends in dramatic chaos. Sometimes it ends before the cameras ever start rolling. Spielberg didn't slam doors in anyone's face. He simply stopped answering when they knocked. The pattern behind the silence. Steven Spielberg's approach to cutting people out of his professional world follows a consistent pattern. He doesn't raise his voice, issue final warnings, or create dramatic scenes. He simply go. He is silent, and that silence becomes permanent. These 5 actors, Megan Fox, Julia Roberts, Shia LaBeouf, Tom Sizemore, and Chevy Chase, all had genuine talent. What they didn't have was the right rhythm for working in Spielberg's carefully controlled creative environment. Spielberg doesn't try to teach actors how to behave professionally. He senses their approach, waits to see if it matches his needs, and if it doesn't work out, he doesn't try to fix the problem. He just walks away quietly and permanently. In his world, losing trust isn't a loud, dramatic event. It's quiet, but it lasts forever. The power of Spielberg's silent treatment extends far beyond just missing out on his personal projects. When he distances himself from someone, other influential people in Hollywood often notice and follow his lead. This creates a ripple effect that can limit an actor's access to many of the most prestigious projects in the industry. Spielberg never announces who is finished working with him. He just stops making those phone calls, and that's how everyone knows it's truly over. His approach serves as both a protection for his creative process and a clear message to the rest of Hollywood about the importance of professionalism, loyalty, and respect in collaborative artistic work.